mission of the Women's Law Center of Maryland is to ensure the physical safety, the economic security, and the bodily autonomy of women across Maryland. We do this through 3 fundamental pillars: direct legal services, informational hotlines, and advocacy. The vision of the Women's Law Center of Maryland is to be a voice for fairness and justice for all women in Maryland. In the past 50 years, the Women's Law Center of Maryland has made huge strides. And so I'm so grateful to our founding mothers who had that forethought and that vision.
Being the first Black woman president of the Women's Law Center, it's an honor. And I'm very excited to see ways that the Women's Law Center can make a connection with people of color in Baltimore. I think the Women's Law Center makes an impact because unfortunately we still have a need for women's equity, women's rights, and until we don't have that need, the Women's Law Center is really critical to kind of level the playing field a little bit.
I know the origin story from my point of view. I was a second-year law student, and a third year, Mary Beth said they won't let me put my credit cards in my own name. She just gotten a divorce. She went to different department stores, and they wouldn't let her change the name. That was the beginning of, we have an issue, let's see if we can deal with it. And then the issues just started pouring in.
I became president in 92, 93. One of the things that we worked on was the gender bias in the courts study. There were people who would go sit in the courtrooms to determine whether the judges were exhibiting bias and how they treated either the plaintiffs or defendants, but most particularly the female attorneys in the room. You know, we were a small but mighty band.
The Women's Law Center of Maryland's legislative advocacy is a really critical component to our mission. We ensure that we are working on anything that's going to have a disproportionate impact on women, whether it's their physical safety, their economic security, or their bodily autonomy. We also work in conjunction with other organizations and advocates across the state to make sure that our voices are amplified.
From the beginning of the Women's Law Center, we did judicial nominating work. We had a committee that would interview the candidates that were up for judicial nomination.
I first became involved with the Women's Law Center back in 2004 when I was a student at the University of Baltimore School of Law. So I was approached by my mentor, Lee Goodmark, and she asked me if I would be interested in helping to found a student affiliate of the Women's Law Center. Along with a group of friends, we founded Students Supporting the Women's Law Center at the University of Baltimore, and that was my introduction to this organization and the advocacy work that it does.
I had the privilege of being the executive director of the Women's Law Center for 13 years. We had so many accomplishments at the Women's Law Center during that period. The one that I would lift up would be the exponential growth in the direct services.
PORP is an acronym for Protection, Order, Advocacy, and Representation Project. It's a project that helps victims of domestic violence get safe from abuse, all the way from the temporary protective order proceeding through the final protective order proceeding and obtain the protective order for the client.
Madovi is the multi-ethnic domestic violence project. If we are able to assist them in getting legal status in America, their trajectory is just extraordinary. They go on to get college degrees, they get jobs, their families succeed and thrive, and it's an immigration project. We really see them grow and thrive through sometimes a 5 or even 10-year-long relationship.
The CLASS project at the Women's Law Center, it stands for the Collateral Legal Assistance for Survivors. And we provide full representation for survivors of intimate partner and domestic violence. That can be anything from custody to divorce, but we do offer full legal representation from beginning of a case to the end of a case.
In the hotline area, we expanded the family law hotline. We created the employment law hotline.
The Women's Law Center's employment law hotline is a really important function within our work because there's no other services like that in the state. We know that women are disproportionately affected within the workforce. By giving the free information to them, we are empowering those women to help make sure that they understand that they don't have to tolerate that behavior, that they have options.
There's really been a focus on building a more intersectional and inclusive, representative feminist community. So we're focused on opportunity regardless of race or class or gender identity. That is one of those core values that really keeps me connected to the organization.
We need to continue to be vigilant for women's rights.
The Women's Law Center is important in the community because it's a voice for women. The words that come to mind are gatekeeper, advocate, spokesperson.
In the mid-70s, Baltimore City Police Department abolished the titles of policewoman and policeman and created a title of police officer. Dozens of women started applying, and some of them even got through, and then they were told they were being rejected because they weren't 5 feet 7 inches tall or taller. That wasn't in the job description. I took the deposition of the police commissioner. I said, why did you not want a lot of women in the police department? And he said, women, those cute little balls of fluff we hold so near and dear. Under oath, that quote ended up in a footnote of our winning decision.
People don't realize, if they're not a woman, what it meant to be a woman lawyer in the old days. So I was on the Human Relations Commission, and we were studying eating clubs. One of the clubs that we were talking with, all the judges and the male lawyers are part of this group, and they can be together, and the woman lawyer could not be part of it. Could you imagine? As women who are appearing before these courts, you're totally excluded. Your story they really can never understand because it's not part of their life.
What the Women's Law Center provided for me, not only mentoring, but sponsoring young women attorneys, WLC created this space for us to flourish.
We are continuing the focus on women and their rights in the workplace, in their everyday lives, and I consider it to be a really important organization. I am so glad that it's still here 50 years later.
In a perfect world, we would not need the Women's Law Center. I hope that the Women's Law Center will continue to impact women in our community, addressing issues not only in gender, but looking specifically at women of color. It's always very exciting for me to see all of the important work that the Women's Law Center does, to see how many lives we touch.